Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, I like to take the time to welcome my guests because I do absolutely feel that they're coming with precious stuff. And I want to stomp one on myself and welcome them and bring them to that attention that they're willing to spend some of this precious stuff, if you will. And the first is their time. This beautiful commodity that has been offered to every one of us, it is the same quantity so that one cannot brag and say, you gave me more or less. We have 24 hours a day. It is what we do with it, how we manage it, how we utilize it to our benefit. And so I want to thank you for coming and sharing some of that precious stuff with me here at Threads of Enlightenment. The other is your story. That story created you who you are today. And it was precious enough to form you, give birth to you, so that we can just enjoy your wisdom and your knowledge and all that you are today. And I just want to thank you and welcome you to Threads of Enlightenment. Thank you so much, Vijay, for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Ken, for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
It is my honor. I would love you to tell the folks, all the listeners, the things that you have created, because as I've mentioned to you, I've been educating them and making them aware that they are creators and they are and so many great seeds that are residing within them that need to give birth. We call those seeds ideas that are residing there within them. So tell them those things that you have given birth so far in your journey on this planet.
Of course. Well, I have created a beautiful career in the wellness and fitness space, something I've been doing for over 20 years. I knew my call was to help people, and through
Yeah.
movement, which was something that came very naturally to me, which was in conflict with how I felt about my body. So I knew that being in that space, helping other people in that space was something that I was meant to do. So I have been a personal trainer, I've been a dance instructor, I've been a group exercise instructor for over 20 years, like I mentioned. But I knew that I wasn't done yet. And so during the pandemic, what I took advantage of the time that you speak of, and I wrote a book, and it's called The Doughnut Diaries. And it is my journey so far of how I struggled with my body for most of my life, for over 4 decades. And how when I turned 40 years old, and I don't want to jump ahead of you, but I just decided that I've had enough, that being in that place of just being sad and being angry and being felt betrayed by my body, I just didn't want to do it anymore. I wanted happiness. I wanted to be joyful and have a wonderful life. And I knew that it was me holding me back. So by writing my book, I was able to share my story, which now has led me to create a safe space for all women to feel whole in their body.
That is a powerful entrance. I cannot tell you the amount of people that I have interviewed and what COVID did to 99% of them. It allowed them to give birth to things that resided within them. And I believe that from listening to these interviews and these desires and callings, those deep spiritual cry of the individuals, I believe that the collective may have called in that, may have called in COVID. And the reason why I say that is because it gave a lot of people by the millions time to reset, to evaluate what was important in life. Is it the career? Is it the family? Is it me? I mean, I've had things inside of me that I think I need to get out. And I believe we called it in, and it afforded many of us the opportunity to give birth to things that were residing. Had not COVID come, I believe a lot of those babies would have been aborted. And but it came to give us that space by which we can now begin to give birth. And you give birth for your books, and you give birth basically to you, to a brand new you. So Let's talk about your family. I always tell people that's the first lab by which we reside in for while we're here, because our parents, which are these scientists, and they have acquired their knowledge and they have produced their theses. And from their knowledge, that they are now going to educate you and I as to how to live here on this earth based on their trauma and how they were affected, and they see the world through that trauma. And some of them were uh, lucky enough to realize that it was a classroom as well, and they were able to make the adjustments. And some of them never did. Um, and that's okay, because our generation, the next generation, was afforded the opportunity to make the change, if you will. And so I love the fact that the family, there's always one Rachel in the family that is awakened to begin to deal with those generational things that walks through the family. I believe they're because we are spirit, soul, and body. I believe that the generational curse speaks to all three of that individual. I call it the wholeness of the individual. And so we have spiritual things that reside within the family. We have the soulish things that reside. We have the physical things that reside. And so all of us. So here you are in this lab, Rachel. Your scientists are now working, mixing their little elixir in your life, and you're there. How did you manage within your family unit? How was this student now receiving all of this wisdom, if you will?
Well, let me just say now that as I've evolved as a human myself, I know that my parents did the best they could with what they had at the time. And I'm coming from a place
Yes.
of forgiveness. I'm coming from a place of acknowledging that fact. But growing up in my household was chaotic. It was a battle. It was
Hmm.
me trying to figure out who I was as an independent person, and that just not being allowed or accepted until I was well into my adulthood. And I just said, I don't know who I am without that. I need some time, I need some
Yeah.
space to figure that out. And it was a beautiful time, but it was also very hard. Never felt that I wasn't loved. I never felt that I was not wanted, but I did always feel suffocated.
Hmm. I think I have a thing that I've noticed. I believe that um, that the family unit is the madness, all of it is so the catalyst by which we are beginning to form. You know how the embryo starts to put the pieces together, and the sinews and the cells begin to form. I believe it's the family unit, as chaotic and crazy as it is. It is designed to put those the sinews and the fleshes and the all the cellular pieces that gives birth to you and I. So here you are in this um, this stew, if you will, and you are um, and I tell people that trauma happens to us simply by how we interpret something as a young person. And it's an incident, it could be just a benign incident or whatever, but it happens. And we base this whole thing about it. And from that space, we began to judge, create, shut down, close up, all of these things. And so you began to look into your space and you see all the chaos and the beauty that is there. What was some of those things that began to touch you and cause you to um, feel within your spirit, Rachel, and your being that this hurts, if you will?
Mm-hmm.
This hurts. And I don't know what it is, but it hurts.
Mm-hmm. That is an amazing question, but I don't think that I still, even with all my, looking back and dealing with my past, I don't know if there was one moment in my life that triggered that. I just knew that there was an emptiness, or there was like a lot of anger, and there was a lot of discomfort. And I just knew that I never felt comfortable in my own skin. So to be able to
Mm.
pinpoint that for you, I'm sorry, I don't. It was just something that was, I feel like maybe what you're saying, I was almost maybe even born with it. It was just something that was an
Wow.
automatic response to, as I got older, as I started to, you know, socialize with other kids. It was just always me, and then it was them. It was never a
Yeah.
collective. So yeah. Yeah, I hope I hope that's what you were looking for, because I have thought about that.
Yeah, because I think I remember I told you about that couch thing that you were saying.
Trust me, I have been in
Because I
therapy my whole
feel,
life,
because I
so.
know, I think we all are to a degree, and we just have to know how to use it to guide us to get out. So here you are, you notice something and you feel this uneasiness, and you are not aware of it, but you know it's here. And as you began to have your relations with others, you were saying that it was them and me. That gulf, if you will, that between them and me, can you kind of dance with us as to what did that gulf look like when you're talking to someone, interacting with someone, with that differences between them and me? What did that look like to this young girl as she begins to walk through life, if you will?
I always felt that I looked different than girls my age. I developed pretty quickly. I remember, in 11th grade, I was like, my mom was taking me shopping for a bra. And I was like, why? I mean, it was just,
Yeah.
we weren't talking about that then. We weren't discussing that. We weren't, comparing those things. I just felt like I was ahead of the girls in my age group. So that gave me a
Hmm.
little feeling of distance, and that I didn't compare, or I didn't relate, or okay, here's a sign that my body is different than all of these other girls. Why is that? And so I think, like, in the fifth and the sixth grade, I just started to be hyper aware that my body was different. And it just was something that I focused on. It was something that I never felt like I could talk to anybody about. So it was something that was always swirling around in my own mind. Like, I was forced to deal with something that I shouldn't have had to deal with. But I don't think that at that time there was the vocabulary for those kinds of conversations. It was just, you saw women, they were looked upon in a certain way, and that was it. It wasn't like, well, why do you
Yeah.
feel this way? Or, you're only 12 years old. Don't worry about that. Let's talk about why your body is changing. There's just, that conversation just didn't happen when I was a little girl. So I think that carrying that with me through my teenage years, where it just, and then women become more and more aware of their bodies. And then you're talking about your bodies. And then, so it just stacked up for me, and it just never stopped.
Yeah, that's a heavy weight to carry as an individual. A young girl, a young woman, as she begins to move through her life. You said, especially in the teenage years, when this is a formidable time, when all that people are looking and talking about is the body, and relating to others through and from that space as they're beginning to walk through their life, and to be there as you're telling your story. I can surmise that it seems like it was a painful time because of not fully understanding what the heck is happening to me, and why am I moving at this rate. Um, and so I could see where that began. So now, because I know once you start doing this, at some point, Rachel, you're going to say, "All right, I'm going to begin to uh, battle this and fight this war with my body." So as you begin to move through your life, you're in your teenage years, you are still trying to dance with it. You're now moving into your college times, and you're leaving, if you will, quote unquote, the nest of your familiarity with home, and you're looking towards beginnings of you. What did that look like in your mind with this girl that had all of this angst and tension within herself, and she is coming away from, quote unquote, this familiarness? What did that world look like to that young girl as she's navigating forward in life?
Well, when I mentioned to you earlier, I felt like for the most part of my life until I turned, well into my 30s, and we'll talk about that, but I was always in a relationship, whether it be with my parents or my friend or a boyfriend. And I never cultivated who Rachel was on her own. I had no idea how to be by myself. I had no idea not to have somebody there to depend on or take care of. So I got married very early. And, you know, thankfully I've dealt with that, and I know what it was now, and I've forgiven and I've done all that stuff. But when I was in that relationship, it was like I was running from one situation to another just because that's all I knew. So when I left my
Mm,
mother's home and moved in and moved away actually to another state with my then husband, it was more of the same, if you will. I was in a different environment. I was with a different person. I was becoming an adult, but still, I didn't know how to take care of myself. I didn't know how to, and at that time, I didn't have the self respect and the self love for when people would talk about my body. Um, but
mm,
I don't want to skip a step because I was always asking. I was always saying, do I look fat, or do I this, or am I I mean, because I didn't have that language for myself. So I was always looking outside myself. So I was inviting that
yeah,
stuff in. So when my husband would say, yeah, you're
yeah,
gaining
yeah,
some weight, or yeah, I would just internalize that, and it would be so painful. But now I realize it's like I was doing that to myself because I would never do that now. I would never feel that way, and I would never look
yeah.
outside myself now, but I've learned. So then it was just from one tumultuous thing to another. And I lived like that, like I keep saying, for so long. Go ahead.
Let me ask you a question, Rachel. Where did you pick that up? Um, that same belief right there, that something was wrong with you as far as your body. I know your body was developing faster than the others. Now, where did you pick this thing up that because you're developing and different, that you are, for lack of a better word, less than the others? Where did that information take place? Where did that belief dropped into you? What happened to you if you can remember that look and go, wait a minute, what is that and what is me? And then the comparison began.
Yes, absolutely. I have a body type, and this is not a put down because I've learned this about myself, that if I don't move my body
Hmm.
holds on to weight. We're not even going to call it
Yeah.
fat. It's just, I mean, even though that is kind of like a scientific thing, right? If you don't move, you don't expend energy. But as a woman who put all her value in her body, that was anytime I would gain
Yeah.
weight, it was like traumatizing. It was like the world was coming to an end. It was, I mean, it would literally be a meltdown where I would cry and say, why does this keep happening to me? Why can't I stay thin? Why can't I stay small? Because I live, and of course, there were women of all sizes and shapes around me, but it didn't resonate at the time that it was I was the thing that was different. I was the thing that was didn't look like everybody else. So I don't know how, other than my body fluctuated so much, And I would always
Hmm.
feel betrayed by my body. I use that word specifically because that is really how I envisioned those times in my life, and how much praise you get when you lose weight and you look the part that society expects you to look. It was
Yeah.
addicting at the same time. It's like I want that, but I don't know how to keep it. It was just, I mean, if I could tell you, Ken, honestly, that my mind, I still haven't quite mastered how to like quiet it down, but I've gotten much better. But my mind was
Yeah.
always like, zzz, like it felt like electricity because I could just never turn off those negative thoughts.
Yeah, it is. That's why I was trying to take you back to pinpoint that, because it was a thought that came. It may have come from looking at someone or seeing something on TV or whatever, but that thought came, and we are ignorant to the power of the thoughts at that time in our life and so forth, because no one is really teaching that. No one is teaching that stuff, especially to young kids, so we allow entrance of this thought, and then that thought begins to brutalize us in a fashion that we take our entire lives, in most cases. None of us are totally over our trauma. None of it, because I believe that it was such a deep spiritual effect and soul to the soul, such a deep effect to both the soul, the spirit, and the body, that it takes the entire lifetime while we're here to begin to, we call it the onion effect, to begin to start peeling back stuff, because it has affect all of us,
Mhm.
and it takes us time to recognize that it has affected all of us, so that's the journey, man.
Mm.
And but to learn to love yourself in that journey, looking at that person, is the key. Yeah, so here we are, as you're moving through life, this young girl, she's married, she's going through all the trauma that she's putting on herself. She's looking for validation outside of herself as she's moving through life, and you're now um, in a partnership with someone. And how did that partnership, because I know that energy is still there, you're pulling this energy with you, how did that partnership develop? And you talk about you being there. How did this thing begin to affect you? How did you begin to notice, and how did you begin to respond as you are looking at yourself within this relationship?
I know that I was just too emotionally and mentally immature to be a married woman. I had no desire to be a wife. I had no desire to be a mother. I just, none of it felt like this was the right time. And I
Yeah.
just never, I think I just shut down. And I used the excuse at the time that he really wanted children. That was something that I never was going to budge on. And never, I just didn't want that.
Hmm.
And, even though it was a very rough time for both of us, we realized that we weren't right for each other. And so when we decided to separate and divorce, it was it felt like I was being free. I just, even though
Yeah.
the timing was hard and it was emotional and it was like I didn't really want to deal with this, I still felt like freedom was just around the corner. So, and again, I was still so young. I was only 26. And I still had no
Yeah.
idea who I was or what I wanted or any of those things. I just knew two things. One, I did not want to be married anymore. And two, I did not want to go back to California. Those were the two things I was super clear on. And I think that even though you're not aware of, like we talk about the universe and the gifts and all those things, even though I wasn't in touch with that at the time, the universe was like, you're going to Portland,
Oh,
you're going
yeah.
to go somewhere else, you're going to meet some people who are going to change your life, and you're going to go back to college and you are going to change your life. So even though I wasn't making conscious decisions at the time, it was being presented to me. So
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the dance that we are constantly in. I think it's and that dance can be for the negative side. We call those red flags, and and then the dance is also directions to expand us, to take us to new directions and stuff like that. So you have this dance, and the dance is what makes the movement within the dance is our decisions. Once we decide one way to another, the dance continues, and so that's why I tell people it's very important that you understand the purpose of your thoughts, because you're dancing and the thoughts will give you direction in your dance. And so be very, very mindful of this. If you guys are listening to us, just listen. Be mindful of the thoughts. It is the piece that guides the dance. And when one begins to become awakened, I call it a day of visitation, and we'll get there with Rachel. You'll see what she does once she gets this information that is available to her as she continues this dance. So here you are, the universe is calling you to a different location. And slowly you began to find your way in the dance, going because of these decisions that you're now making, because preparation is being made for you there. You just don't know it. And so, as you are beginning to make these decisions to take you there, talk to me about your freedom here, because you said, I was free.
Mm.
And you're now making these decisions to take you to this area. What was that like to you once you made that, as you, even though you are just, you know, moving, but you're moving, how did that freedom taste to you?
Oh my God, it was so beautiful. I just remember I got it, you know, I moved in with a coworker, and it was like I had my own space, and I started to make girlfriends, and I learned how to salsa dance. And Portland at that time was just such a beautiful up and coming city and safe. You know, my girlfriends and I could go downtown, and it would just be a safe place to go at night. And and then Portland Community College came a calling, and I found a
Yeah.
fitness program that was available for a year certification, and I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. I want to help people exercise. I At the time, I'll be very honest with you,
Yeah.
it's like, because I struggle with my weight my whole life, I'm going to help people lose weight. So that was my intention in the beginning, which,
Yeah.
25 years later, it's evolved into something completely different, which is a
Yeah.
beautiful thing in itself. But so I'm going to school, I have friends, I'm, living in this beautiful space. And then I moved in with my girlfriends, and we had our own apartment. And, now I'm getting closer to 30, having my 18 and 20-year life experience.
Yeah.
And I never really got down on myself about that, because, I made a choice to get married and be in a relationship in my early 20s. I didn't get to do any of this stuff. So I'm doing it now. so yeah, I spent, my late 20s and my early 30s kind of just living the college girl life, and it was great. I had a great time. It was fun.
Yeah. So when you were living the fun life, as you said, the college folks, and that is fun. I mean, that is part of growing up, having fun and so forth. As you're moving through life now, and you are coming into your 30s, and I know you had mentioned in your 40s when things began to crystallize. So here you are in your 30s, and you're working your own place. You're doing all the excursions with the girls. You're getting all the stuff out there. How did you begin to relate to you? Because here you are, you're gaining the freedom. You see that the exercise is your knowing in your heart at the time, and your knowledge that as I get slimmer, I feel, quote unquote, as they say, sexier, and the world is mine. How did you begin to, as you're beginning to experience some of that, what was happening to you, Rachel, inside your thoughts, inside your being, what was happening to you when your girlfriends weren't there and you were by yourself?
I was never by myself. So that part of my growth really was put on hold for a good chunk of time. You know, I lived in the Northwest for 7 years, and I honestly don't think, other than when I was sleeping or taking a shower, I was by myself. I always had a roommate.
Hmm.
I always had a group of girlfriends. I was always around people. So unfortunately, that did not really happen for me. But I will tell you, now that I know what it feels like to spend time by myself, when I would start to get like that really weird energy where I was just feeling like, oh, all you people are getting on my nerves, it's because I didn't have any alone time to regenerate or to refresh, because I was always just giving out my energy, just like it was like candy at Halloween. And I was never giving myself that
Yeah.
same courtesy. So I was cranky a lot.
I was about to ask you, how in the world did you survive that? I can't do that. I'd be crawling on the floor, just absolutely losing my mind because I've always been one of those where solitude was so important to me that my family will tell you, my friends, Rachel, they'll tell you, here I was in this corporate America, guys, and I had two beepers at the time. I'm dating myself now. At two beepers, I had my cell phone for my company, and I had my phone. This was my life all the time. And so I was always inundated with people because I worked in the healthcare field at the time, managed healthcare was growing, and it was just a wild party. And I would turn my phone off and my pager, or I couldn't turn it off, but I would leave it there and not pay attention to it. And the phones would be buzzing, and I would not speak to anyone for days because it was just way too much for me. And my family and friends got used to the fact that I was like that, and they knew that when I came out of it, I would then return the calls to everyone. So this is what I did, Rachel. I put on the all both phones had two of my favorite songs. So when it started ringing, I would just close my eyes and just pretend that I'm hearing my favorite song, and I wouldn't answer the damn phone at all. I just listening to my music because it's energy, Rachel. You're giving of your energy, and you must have been a pretty strong person to be able to do that because I was not that strong. I had to shut myself down. So here you are, as you are moving through life, you are, as you said, busy and not giving yourself or aware that you need to be taking some time for self. What happened? Because something had to happen to make you go, wait a minute, because you can't exist like that forever.
Mm-mm.
You're going to, we call it burnout.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to crash. What happened to you, Rachel? Because that is hard to sustain all through one's life, and you're in your 30s, and you have been sustaining that for a mighty long time.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to you?
I was in, so let me just tell you that it took me 4 years to graduate from a 2-year program because of, just all my stuff. And so
Yeah, you're
I'm in
all
my
over.
final year of college. My teachers are all failing me, saying, if you don't pass this class this time, like, you don't get to take it for another year. And I was like, I can't do this. I literally made the choice within myself. It wasn't a discussion. I just stopped hanging out with all of my friends. And anytime they would call or say,
Yeah.
what's going, let's do this, I was like, no, I have homework. I have got to get my shit together and graduate from college because I'm moving to New York to be a famous personal trainer. So you're getting in my way. So I literally moved out of my apartment, found my own apartment, like far away, close to school. So I had no excuses. And I just dove headfirst into school. And all my teachers were like, why didn't you do this long time ago? And I said, I don't have time for that discussion. We're here now. Let's do this. And
Yeah.
yeah, and I got through school. I graduated with a degree, and it was the first time I ever did something for myself by myself, and it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is a powerful imagery. And I want to stop here for a minute to talk to people because it's very important, this principle that Rachel is talking about. I always say to people that the reason why you're circular or in your life you find yourself in this circular mode is because you haven't really made a decision yet. And why do I say that? Because there's a principle that I've read and I've seen all through my life that one must decide a thing and it shall be established. The Bible tells us this principle. And that decision is you. It has nothing to do with anyone else. It is your decision. It's a personal thing that you make. And when you make that decision, when you make that kind of decision, like what Rachel is talking about, what does that kind of decision looks like? She told you. She shut down partying. She extracted herself from that lifestyle. It caused her to move. It will, once you have decided a thing, it shall establish. It shall be established because once you make it your principal goal, you will then begin to um, take the steps necessary to make that decision come to pass, not to anyone else, to you. And that's the most important thing. And so I wanted to stop here to remind those of you that you're in a circular location because you haven't decided yet. Because the human spirit is, once you have decided, it's designed to, it needs the arrow, it needs the that focus, and you need to give it that, and it's the decision part. So you graduated, you achieved something, you are high, you're not just free, you're high now, you are up and just rolling all over the place. What did you do with this newfound self discovery, self motivating aspect? This girl, she's in her 30s now, she did it. What did you do?
I moved to New York City, and
Yeah,
and
you became this
well,
famous.
that part didn't happen, but I did become a very successful personal trainer. I lived in there in Manhattan
Yeah.
for 15 years, and the
Wow.
first few months were a little crazy, a little overwhelming, and I grew up in suburbia, so moving to the biggest city
Yeah.
arguably in the United States was a real slap in the face. But I wouldn't change it for anything. It was the one place that forces you to grow the hell up and take responsibility for yourself quick,
Quick.
real quick.
Yeah. I Yeah, I'm from Queens. I grew up in Queens, and then I lived in Manhattan, and I know the big city and what it does to an individual. It'll, like they say, the song says, if you can make it there, you make it anywhere, because it forces you to grow up really bad because you're dealing with all the different cultures, the mindset, the beliefs, the heat, and those cold that would hug you in the evening when you're walking by a building in the wintertime. And the energy that is there, it does focus you and cause you to begin, even walking, you have to walk with your sixth sense out, standing there with you, and it will save your life. So here you are, you're in the big city. The food is good, the air is foggy, the noise is loud, and you're having a great time because I know that city is a good city. So here you are. What did New York do to you as you get there? You said first, initially, you were, in shock, and after you got past the shock, what did this relationship that you had with New York and these new people now, and what did it begin to do to you as you got a glimpse that an individual decision can change your life and brought me to New York? What did you begin to do with you?
Well, I was still in the space where even though I was getting more and more strong emotionally, I was still in a space where I was looking outside for that. I did not, I've learned this term from therapy, but I didn't know how to self-soothe myself. So I was always looking
Mm-hmm.
outside myself for comfort, to not be alone. And I say this in my book, but New York can actually be, I mean, you're never alone. Never, 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 never
Yeah.
alone, but it can be the loneliest place in the world because people there don't have time
Yeah.
for you're crazy. They just don't. And so when
Yeah.
I would say, "Oh, come over and and people say, "No, I got other stuff to do." I would take that so personally. It's like, you want me to sit in my
Yeah.
apartment by myself and what? Entertain myself? Like be okay with that? Like it was just so it really brought that part of my existence to the forefront. And it's like, you have to deal with this. You really have to deal with this because you cannot go through the rest of your life feeling like you cannot be alone. You can't. So I remember I started just kind of taking myself out to lunch and walking in a different neighborhood and just exploring New York by myself. And it was a very good thing because it made me feel like I could be in this city and not have anybody. But then I started to make friends there too, but it just made me feel like I could be there and be okay by myself.
That's a good place to be because I know what that feels like. So here you are, you're beginning to explore yourself and beginning to tap into who you are. As you're moving through life, again, you're in your 30s and you're so for getting through. Talk to us internally because the thread that you had is your body, your relationship with you and your body. New York has some good food, um, and you can eat that late at night. And in your busyness of being busy, sometimes you step out of your
Mm.
habits. How did you manage yourself within that space as you're growing, stepping out, and getting in touch with yourself, Rachel? How did you, what was going on with you as you're moving through 30, 34, and stuff like
So
that?
the interesting thing about New York City, like you said, there's literally some place to eat on every single street corner. I mean, there's no shortage of places to eat in New York. So that was one part of the new life. I was able to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner out. But I wasn't driving anymore. So I was walking everywhere. And I still haven't figured out the
Yeah.
buses or the subway. So I was walking everywhere. So there was definitely a drop in body weight, but there was also a increase in calories. So it just goes to show you that
Yeah.
one without the other is, you know, whatever. We
Hmm.
can get into that later. But
Yeah.
um, so I was actually losing weight when I first moved there, even though I was not eating that great, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was,
Yeah, it makes sense because,
yeah.
yeah. New York, you're using public transportation more than anything else. And sometimes I used to love walking in New York because of the energy. And like you did, I would go into Greenwich Village sometimes and stuff like that, not too far from there, living in one of the one of the things that I love about New York is the fact that you can have a nice cafe sitting down and people watch, and it's a beautiful sport. And you can do that all day, all night, and not be bored at all with all the beautiful personalities and the people that walk by. So you're growing, you're eating, and but calories and so forth as you're moving through life. Talk to us as to when things began to change, as they say, when you began to lose a little control in things, it began to spin out of control, and you got to start looking at this deeper aspect of yourself. Talk to us as you're navigating through life when you began to notice some of those red flags, and you just walk by them like they weren't there.
Hmm. Well, if I didn't mention this earlier in the interview, I was a very angry person and I would take things so personally. And I was always having a problem with somebody or something. And you can only get through life like that for so long before nobody wants to deal with you. And
Yeah.
opportunities just kept coming into my, forefront. It's like confrontations and missed opportunities and just being sad and fed up all the time. And I just didn't feel, it was almost exacerbated by living in New York. I know I had always felt this way, but because it was always being thrown back in my face, because people in New York will tell you like to go, you know, and so people in other places don't
Yeah.
necessarily call you on your shit, but in New York that was happening to me
Yeah.
constantly.
Oh, yeah.
And I was always in a fight or a battle, and I said something is not working here. And even though I had moments of epiphanies and moments of awareness, I just kept, I guess the work was too much and it was going to take too much time and energy to really dig that deep, that I kept just kind of like pushing it down. But as I was turning, 36, 37, it wasn't going to go anywhere. It wasn't going to go away. And it was like,
Yeah.
girl, you need to deal with this now. And you got to just like, so I had to do what I did in Portland. I had to just stop. I had to stop dating. I had to stop worrying about what I was going to do with who and whatever. And I just literally withdrew. And I had some amazing books. I had some amazing, people that I could be real honest with. And I reconnected with one of my girlfriends from Portland. And that to me was like the
Hmm.
timing of all of that was just so perfect and so beautiful. And I just decided I don't want this anymore. I don't want to be this person anymore. And I didn't even really believe it's who I was. It was somebody else, because it
Yeah.
never felt natural. It always felt just I know I'm using sounds to describe my emotions, but it I
No,
but
no,
it
no.
just always
Yeah.
felt so chaotic. That's a good word. And
Yeah.
so other than going to work every day, I would come home, I would do some journaling, I would read my books, I would just sit with myself. And there were times, and I lived in a 400 square foot apartment. So, in New York City, there were times
Yeah.
where I would just ball up on the floor and just cry. I would just cry. I would just like, because
Yeah.
I just needed all of that just to finally get out, just get out of me.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
I just remember just starting to feel lighter and lighter and lighter, and I started meditating, and I started just doing things for Rachel and for Rachel's peace. Like that word kind of became my mantra. Like, I just want peace. I don't want this chaos anymore. And
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to jump ahead of you, but I realize now that that all was being created by this one right here. Like, I was doing that to
Yeah.
myself and I was
Yeah.
doing that to the people around me. So that's a big lesson to learn.
Yeah. I like the fact that you're talking about it, Rachel, because a lot of people don't understand that we are the issue, and the people come into our lives to make us aware of our scotoma, as I say to people, that blind side, that habit, that you don't know exists because it's such a part of you. You don't even know. It's just you. And like you said, New Yorkers will tell you, they'll tell you straight in your face, time and time over and over again, because they're aware of it. And that's why I always tell people, be very mindful of who's in your life, because they're there to bring attention to things that you need help with. And so when people come into my life, Rachel, I usually, within my meditation, I will ask the question, what do you think they're here for? Be, be in a state of awareness so that you can see if there's a lesson for you, or if you are to be one to give. Are you a receiver or a giver within this relationship? Be mindful of the conversations. And as I become like that, I had to train myself to think that way. And as I began to train myself, I began to understand relationships that came into my life, and the purpose and peace became important. Um, you began to talk about a couple of tools, Rachel, that I was waiting for you to get to these tools, because everyone gets there. Go ahead. You have a thought.
I
Come
actually have a
say
quick
it.
question. Can we stop recording for once? Okay.
Go ahead.
I am having the best time, but I am late for another. Can I just reschedule really fast? Do you mind can I call that person real quick? Is that okay?
Yeah,
I'm
go
so
ahead. Go
sorry.
ahead.
Hold on.
Yeah, that's
Shit.
fine.
Thank you so much, Ken. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, 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 no. I was saying that I was waiting for you to get to this point where the tools, as we talked about earlier, are all available. They're the tools that are there in the ethos, as they say. And I heard you mention a couple of them that you began to bring into your space to help you with your thoughts and the controlling and the growth that begins. First is your gaining knowledge. You talked about getting some books and began to uh, delve into those, the knowledge that is out there within the ethos. And then you began to recognize there's a couple of tools that I can bring into my life. One is your meditation, the other is journaling. These tools get you to slow down your thought pattern, and you begin to reprogram yourself with those three tools that Rachel mentioned. And it's very important, guys, to recognize those three tools. You begin to uh, bring knowledge into your space, books, tapes, and all the other things what they have today, even further than that. You begin to use meditation to quiet your thoughts, journaling to clarify and to bring them out. As you begin to do these things and you begin to notice stuff within yourself, Rachel, what did you do once you began? Because having those tools access and began to practice them, you begin to notice some stuff about
Mm-hmm.
yourself. What did you begin to notice? You've mentioned many of them before, but what did you begin? Because they're layers, as we
Mm-hmm.
said, onions. What did you begin to see, Rachel? And then I know it gets to a place where it terrifies you, but what did you see? And you said to yourself, "My God, I got to do some work. I need help there." I have to do it, girl. I know
Yeah.
about it.
I started to just really feel the opposite of the anxious person that I had become, or that I was my whole life. And I started to feel some moments, and I'm just going to use the word moments because it took a while,
Yeah.
but some moments of peace and some moments
Yeah.
of calm. And I was like, oh, this is different. And I remember anytime something would upset me, and that was like a lot, I would always reach for the phone or reach for another
Yeah.
person. And mind you, I had a therapist too, okay? So it's not like I was trying to navigate this by myself. But I remember, like, let me sit here with me for a minute and see why I'm upset about this. And understanding things like what the
Yeah.
word vibration started to mean, and understanding what the word energy
Yeah.
really meant and what it was and how it affected my life.
Yeah.
And so being open to those things that I just paid no attention to before was a very
Yeah.
cool thing, because I had never my whole life
Yeah.
felt calm. And so now that I was having moments of that, I just I just really I wanted more. I wanted more of that.
Now talk to us, because I know this journey begins. We talk about. I told you the purpose why it's here. The journey is to begin to discover the self. As you were mentioning, you're discovering yourself and you wanted more of it. Now, talk to us about that language, that thought that you picked up that you were less than, your body is this, and all of that stuff going on. Because this is front and center of who you are. When you began to look at those things, what did you do, and what was your relationship now with your body? Did you begin to enter into it, or were because we know sometimes we
Mhm.
leave it and we vacate it? What was your relationship with your body now as you began to look into it and stuff like
Well,
that?
during this time frame of just kind of beginning my self discovery, I had had a very, very dramatic weight loss. And I'm almost 40 at this point, and I had lost about 50 pounds.
Hmm.
I'm in a size 0 body. I had never been that small in my entire life. So here I am. My body is societally perfect. But you know how the
Yeah.
universe was like, if you really want this, I'm going to test you just a couple of times. And I entered a
Yeah.
relationship with someone who was just, it was so tumultuous that I lost myself for about a year. So I'm skinny, I'm real skinny,
Wow.
but I'm miserable. And
Yeah.
I just was so, I don't know, I just felt lost. I just felt super lost. And so, having that last year of my 30s, just in this space of just chaos and just, oh God, it was really hard. My 40th birthday comes along. I have a party. I had friends. This person had exited my life. The next day I go to work and I'm just like, okay, I'm 40 now. What am I going to do with myself? This behaviors, these things that I'm still not connecting with who I'm really supposed to be. I don't want this anymore. Like, I literally remember in my head screaming at myself, like, I don't want this anymore. And I went into a room at the gym and it was dark and it was just mirrors everywhere. And I just sat there and I just cried, 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 cried. Looking at this woman in this mirror who was glowing and she was beautiful. And I was like, who is that? And then I just, through my
Wow.
tears, I was like, oh, that's me. And I had that, like, it was almost like the word meshing my two beings together that day, because I had always felt like I wasn't beautiful, like I wasn't smart, that I wasn't kind, that I wasn't honest. And that day it was like, yeah, you are. You always were. You just didn't know how to tap into that or how to express that. So that Rachel, she died that day, and this Rachel was born. And it was just,
Wow.
and now, granted, I mean, the learning never stops, and I recognize that.
Yeah, it's
But
a journey.
but the
It's a journey.
battle, the
Yeah.
the battle with myself emotionally, of loving myself and being able to express that person died that day. And the person who is here now knows that I am all those things, and I can tell other people that you are those things too. And that was something I was never capable of doing. Like, really genuinely giving someone else a compliment or saying how wonderful they were. And that is something that I am so grateful for.
Yeah, that space where one dies, um, it's a powerful place to be because it's the exchange from the mind, being led by the mind or governed by the mind, the intellect, and then we make the crossover to be governed by the heart. It is a powerful time. I remember mine, and I love the imagery of you standing in front of the mirror. That's a powerful imagery for one to have that impactful insight at that time about you. What a powerful um, imagery, Rachel. That's a powerful stuff. What an honor to have that happen to you, where you're able to see you in a room of mirrors in tears and realizing that I am beautiful in every single way. That is a great gift that was offered to you. So here you are, you came out, you have been resurrected, as they say. And this new you comes and you began to see yourself differently. Talk to me as to that space now where you recognize yourself. I am simply, I am,
Hmm.
you know? And how did you receive that? How did you nourish you with that information? How did you use it to hold this woman and hug her with that because she's been through so much for so long?
Mm.
How did you treat her? What did you do with her as you began to recognize and she has been given birth to? What did you do and how?
Well, now that I knew what real peace felt like, there is nothing or no one or not a damn thing that was going to get in my way of feeling like that. And I love to tell people that
Yeah,
I am not oblivious to life happens, right? We are all challenged no matter how peaceful we are. But what I
yeah,
do say is that I'm happy I'm happy every day. Am I happy all day every day? Maybe not.
yeah,
But at the end of that day, I go to bed with gratitude. I go to bed with, loving myself, loving my partner, loving where I live. I just go to bed with gratitude and I wake up with gratitude. And whatever happens in between that, I know that I have the skills to deal with that now. And sometimes it's not easy, but I think that is the most valuable lesson I learned at that time, is that only I can disrupt my peace, really. Only the things that are coming into my life or coming into my space are really lessons. And they're more probably about lessons about me than they are about what's going on in the world. And I think sometimes people might think people who talk like this are super unaware of what's going on in the world, and I am not. But I also know that if I want to stay peaceful, I can't inundate myself with that either. There's awareness, and then there's like obsession. And
yeah.
I can't do that to myself because I lived for 40 years in just misery. And there's no way I'm giving that up now. There's just no way. So I do things for myself. I move my body. I um, make space for my friends, but I also make that space for that alone time that I ignored for so long. Like I need that. I need that on a daily basis, and I make sure that I give that to myself.
You guys that have been listening to this conversation, what a powerful story. And she has been laying out for us all the key principles in personal growth, the personal development. You get to a space where you become very selective as to the energy that you allow in your space. It's not the fact that we can, I believe, Rachel, we are more aware of the pain and all the things. And because we are more aware of it, because we've always been sensitive to it, I think now we are becoming more selective as to the amount that we let in versus before. It was all coming in. And now we are living the life by design. And that is what I tell people. We are now becoming designers of our life versus where one lived by default thinking. And when we live in default thinking, it is fearful, it is disorganized, it is all over the place. But when one begins to design, we allow certain friends, we allow certain energy, we allow certain information to come in, we allow certain thoughts to come in because we know why, what happens when we take a thought, it becomes fruitful. So we become designers, guys, and you have an opportunity. Rachel is telling you and welcoming you to become a designer of your life. And she has been giving us the roadmap as she has been engaging in this conversation. So here you are. In the beginning of this beautiful conversation, you had said COVID shows up. You are this 40 something year old woman. You are this new, you've given birth to this beautiful thing. You recognize who you are. And COVID shows up to give you even more of a deeper insight into you. Talk to us as to when we are all shut down. and you are looking at yourself inwardly, and you're enjoying self, but you know there is this pull on you saying you've been through this for a reason. It's time, and you have this dance. Talk to us about that space right
Absolutely.
there.
So at that stage, I'm about 48 years old, and everything has literally shut down overnight. And my girlfriends and I and my clients were all trying to stay connected virtually and figure all this stuff out. And I had this wonderful peer. She was really in my gym space that I would take my clients to, the only other woman trainer, which still blows my mind. So she and I really connected, and she and I
Yeah.
always had a very lovely friendship. We still do. And we were talking one
Mm.
day via FaceTime, and I was telling her how I was kind of coming into this new space of health at every size and intuitive eating and listening to my body's signals, which I realize I've been on a restrictive diet my whole life. And, what does that really look like when you don't do that? I was just kind of like at the infancy of that. And she's like, you should write a book. And I said, if I could trust that I knew where a semicolon went or a period went or a paragraph started and ended, sure, I would do that. But I didn't really have faith in my skills as a grammarian. So she said,
Yeah.
well, my client did this thing called You Speak It. And she talked her story into a book, and this publisher did everything for her. And I was like, what? So put me
Yeah.
in touch with her, put me in touch with the publishing. I mean, it just, when the universe is something is meant to be, there are no roadblocks.
Yes.
So everything was
Yeah.
just seamless, seamless, seamless,
Yes, there's
seamless.
none.
And he and I had a beautiful conversation, and all just like how I see you on video and I see your beautiful smile and I trust you to tell all my life
Yeah.
secrets to. He was very similar that way. And we agreed that this was going to happen. And so I stopped
Yeah.
putting excuses, the money, the time, the blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm going to invest in myself. I've been wanting to do a book about my life for God knows how long. I'm just going to do it. And so the process started. The manuscript came, and I read it and I said, this is it. This is almost it. This is almost it. And I called the publisher. I said, listen, I want to do some of my own tweaks on the manuscript. I'll get back to you. So we took a few months. And at that time, of course, so now we're faced with the decision. Do we stay in New York? Do we leave New York? What do we do? And we decided to go live with family for
Yeah.
a year in Florida to kind of figure out what our next
Hmm.
step was. Do we just take a break from New York? Do we go somewhere else? I mean, it was just so all of that was kind of parallel to my book. But I didn't give up on it. I was like, this is something that's got to be done, and I'm gonna do it. So I essentially had a foundation, which was my manuscript, and then I rewrote it because I realized how
Yeah.
important it was. Even if my message was still a little cloudy, the message of my experience was super clear, and it was more
Yeah.
important to share my whole story, meaning not just the successes. Oh, look at me, I'm a size 0. But then how I got back to a size 12 after that.
Yeah.
So I was like, we got to share all of it. So it took me another 6 months
Yeah.
to kind of rewrite the book. I did that. I was very happy with it. I remember
Hmm.
I read it one more time and I was like, there's nothing else I can do at this time. There's just nothing more that can be taken or added. So I
Yeah.
submitted it for editing, and so that was October. No, that was probably February of 2021, and it was on the shelves by October of 21.
Wow. Congratulations. I know that journey, when we are called to now make that next step in our journey, it can be a beautiful mess, but it is beautiful. And as we exit there and we come onto the other side, we now are presented in a new light with new information and new, I guess, way to serve. So here you are, you have the book. And those that are listening to us, we're going to provide all that information. I want you to get and buy her books. And I'm going to give you guys some additional stuff, all of it, so you can get her space, get into to Rachel's, bother her, just trouble her, get her advice, get all of it. I keep telling people, when you purchase a person's books, those words that are there on that page is a one-on-one private meeting with her, where you are not being interrupted by anyone unless you allow them to interrupt you. So get it and give it to friends and so forth, so that they can come out of their situation. There are lots of women and men that are dealing with this body shaming aspect of the self that we need to deal with. So I want to talk to you about one of your one of those, I call it, enchanting times that you and I get a chance to be a part of, when we are talking with someone and walking them through. And because we've walked that journey and we're listening to them, Rachel, and they are troubled, they are lost. And from the conversation, and we are excited about this conversation because the conversation will help us to pinpoint exactly where they are, because we're familiar with those places because we were
Mhm.
there. So we are going to try to make you aware of some information, because we can't really force it down your throat. We'll make you aware of this, some things that we noticed when we were there once before. And when you're talking to them and you see it in their eyes, Rachel, when they begin to really go, wow, I didn't know that. And that information begins to land into their spirit, into their soul, and they become awake. Invite us to one of those meetings, one of those conversations, one of those enchanted moments, as I call them. And how did that person feel, and what did it do to you?
It definitely solidifies when I see that happening. The light, I call it the light going on. It solidifies that I'm doing the right thing and that I
Yeah,
am in the right place, the right space, and my
yeah,
mission is super clear. So I'm grateful for that. But as you said, so many times you're dismantling a belief system that someone has had for their whole life. Even if it is as simple as I don't eat
yeah,
sugar or I don't eat fat. So when you actually
yeah.
invite someone into a conversation like that, it's a curiosity. It's like, well, why? What do you believe about those
Mm-hmm.
things that you're so, steadfast about? And then you can start to bring, all those body things and shame things and you have to be a certain size things out into the forefront and you can talk about it. So it's not me lecturing you about how you can eat fat because fat actually is really good for you. Fat, olive oils, avocado, they're so essential for brain function and for all those things that your body
Mm-hmm.
does naturally. So even though I can come at you with super duper facts, I'm trying to have a conversation with you and get to know
Yeah,
you instead of because you're right. I can hear something a million times, and on the million and one is when it sinks in. And I think a lot of it has to do with how it's presented
yeah.
to me, as well as being
Mm-hmm.
in the right space to receive it. So I also have been able to be, I've
Yeah,
been doing this a long time, that if someone is not ready, I just stop the conversation because I'm not trying to convince you that I'm right. I have no desire to do that. I have no desire to
yeah,
be right. So if you're asking me and you keep asking me questions and I can see that you're engaging with me, I'll keep going all day, every day. But if you're like, I don't eat fat and I don't
yeah,
want to eat fat. Okay, great. Have a great day. It was nice meeting you. So I've learned how to
yeah,
engage with someone if they want that engagement, but I've also learned to save my energy if they don't want it to. And I think as a coach, as a body
yeah.
love educator, which I love to call myself, it's not a real title, by the way, I just made that up. Um, I I I appreciate where you're at because I've been there, like you said, for many years when I wasn't ready to hear it or to take action or to maybe make some changes in my own life. But when I was ready, I drink all that information up. So I just kind of wait for people to get there.
Yeah, and everyone that is listening to us, and Rachel, I want to thank you for coming by Threads of Enlightenment, and I want to make them aware that this powerful person that you're listening to is available for you. Though that body shame piece, man, a lot of young women, a lot of young men, a lot of older women, older men. It is a part of society that has been programming us for many years, and this is how we ought to be, how to look, and all those things. And I have someone that has some secrets for you that can help you to love yourself regardless of your size. That's what they're saying, but what you are saying is different. And so I have someone that will teach you about the body love, and I love it. I think you ought to love your body. It is your house. You ought to want to cherish it. You want to look at it and be mindful of the power that is in, and sometimes we just have to uh, eat the right food to keep the house looking good. You know, people paint it, people do all kinds of different things to the house to to keep your natural house in order. We have spring cleaning, we have all of these things. I got someone that can help you with all of that. And Rachel, thank you again for coming. And we're going to provide all of her stuff. I want you guys to get our books, become one of her disciples. I said there are a lot of people that want to be clients, but become a disciple. A disciple will change the world. Clients come back and forth, and like you said, if you are not ready, you are a client. But when you become a disciple, you are ready. So I invite you guys to come to her and become disciples. And those that have been listening to us, purchase our books. We'll put the links together so that you can offer it to friends that are struggling, that you notice, that are having these issues. Give them some help, some guidance, so that they can become better human spirits while they're here on this earth. And we'll learn to love you as a result. Thank you so much for coming to Threads of
Thank you so
Enlightenment,
much for
Rachel.
having
Thank
me,
you.
Ken. It was so much fun.